Before I begin this year's ranking, I've seen a few more films from 2016 since last year, so here's what that list looks like now. Anyway, on with the video. Hello, hi, hey, sup you dudes and dudettes, my name is GNator84, and I'm very glad I didn't stop making movie reviews like I said I would, as this year was even more interesting than the last, and my opinions have changed for quite a few of them, so join me as I rank all the films I saw in cinemas this year. And when I say this year, I mean for the UK, as La La Land came out in January over here, as will Coco, but that's for next year. With that in mind, on with the countdown. I liked all the movies I saw this year, but some definitely more than others, so I wasn't too upset to put this at the bottom of the list, even though I enjoyed it. This is essentially a beat-for-beat retelling of the 1991 classic, and after seeing The Jungle Book, which did change a few things to make it somewhat different, it is a little half-arsed. That's not to say it didn't do some things well. I was never the biggest fan of Gaston in the original, but him and LeFou in the remake are really entertaining. I love it when you can tell actors are just having a blast with a role, and it makes them fun to watch. And calling it a beat-for-beat retelling is a little unfair, as they did try to add new stuff, and it's always interesting to see something done a little differently. My biggest issue is one I didn't even realise I had. It's forgettable. I had to rewatch my review because of writer's block, and I was surprised at how many points that I brought up had completely slipped my mind, and I usually have a really good memory when it comes to this sort of thing. Heck, as I say this to you all, some parts of the movie are only just now coming back to me. I probably am being too harsh on the film, as I still enjoyed watching it and it had its good moments, but this was the least memorable film of the year for me. And on a final note, and one that couldn't be hit naturally apparently, yeah, that's not auto-tuned at all. This was a fun popcorn blockbuster, but nothing more. I liked it fine, but much like Suicide Squad, I definitely wouldn't watch it again. But if I had to watch one of those two again, I would pick this one. It has characters we're already familiar with, and seeing as one is a perfectly realised version of Batman and the other is Gal Gadot, they're fun to see again. And the new ones are likeable enough, and they engage in fun action scenes and some okay banter to make for a fun time. But it's definitely a flawed time. The CGI is okay for the first two acts, but by the third, it's crap. And while it has more story than Suicide Squad, it's still a little thin, and after rewatching Batman v Superman again, it feels like there was some wasted potential that film set up. But as a whole, it's entertaining enough to waste 2 hours with, and without giving anything away, the second post-credit scene has me very excited for the future of the DCEU. Overall, it's nothing great, but it's enjoyable. Seeing as the film's been out for a little while, I have to give a mention to this scene.
It's because...
What? Joking aside, this was a cool movie to watch on the big screen, having nostalgia for some of the other Pokemon movies, which are better than this one, but it's still good. Though it was marketed as a retelling of Ash's origin story, it's only for the opening, and then it's a fun road trip film set in the Pokemon universe. It's nothing that spectacular, but for what it is, it's enjoyable. If you're a Pokemon fan who missed a chance to see this on the big screen, it's worth checking out on DVD. I didn't actually review this movie even though I saw it in cinemas, simply because I wasn't feeling 100% at the time. So, here's my review of the movie now. I really liked the first film, and I'll definitely say it's still better, but this was still a charming movie, one that was very Wes Anderson-esque. Hugh Grant was great fun as the villain, and as someone who typically complains about CGI in movies, and I'll be doing so again later, Paddington looks really damn good. For me personally, the film gets really over the top at the end, with an Uncharted-like set piece. I'm sorry, it's just hilarious that I compared Uncharted with Paddington. But still, this was an enjoyable ride that's harmless, British fun. When I first saw this movie, I thought the first half was hilarious, but the second really paled in comparison. When I saw the film a second time, I thought the exact same. It's not terrible, but after what came before, it really falls flat. But the first was good enough to still warrant a recommendation. It's fast-paced, packed with references, and very, very funny.
Paddington, but all the kids at the orphanage call me Dick.
Well, children can be cruel.
If the film had maintained its greatness for the whole runtime, this would have been much higher on the list. But once the movie tries to reveal its emotional core and have its big finale, it really does go downhill, at least for me. But the first has enough laughs, respect to the Batman mythos while still poking fun at it, and wonderfully fast animation that makes it worth a watch. Well, this quickly became one of the most divided Star Wars movies ever, and I have to admit, it does have its silly moments, and there's times when it feels like there should be more impact than there actually is, but this was still a really entertaining movie. There's nothing quite like seeing a Star Wars movie on the big screen and getting chills all over as the opening crawl plays and seeing these iconic characters again and witnessing how their stories continue. Having discussed this movie with others who have seen it, there's a lot to nitpick about, but that would be going into spoiler territory. Still, it's worth checking out to spark debate with others, but if you're a Star Wars fan, chances are you've seen it already. This is the highest animated film on the list, and after last year, yeah, this one was a bit of a downgrade. Especially seeing as my favourite of the year was a 2-day event, as well as essentially being an extended episode of the show. But as a fan of said show, I really enjoyed it. I always like seeing hand-drawn animation in theatres, and this was wonderfully fluid. And much like Star Wars, it was cool to see these likeable characters again, in an interesting standalone story that had my audience applauding at the end. For some reason. This wasn't anything amazing, but for what it is, I had a great time watching it. And 2018 already looks set to be an interesting year for animation, and we'll see how that turns out soon enough. 2017 saw me discover the Linda Carter Wonder Woman show, and I'll admit, I like it more than the movie. The characters are more likable and it's just charming. But with that said, I did still really enjoy this movie. The band of heroes are still really likable, and you root for them throughout the adventure. Gal Gadot was... a good heroine who, although by the end partakes in a pretty ludicrous final showdown, is so well built up that you're more involved in the story than thinking how nuts the confrontation is. Actually, she participates in some really good action, not quite the level of BVS's finest battles, mainly thanks to some poor CGI, but they're still really solid. Actually, that segues into my biggest issue with the movie, and that's that the special effects are pretty crap. They never look convincing and it's very distracting whenever it's on screen. But it doesn't take me out of the movie in any way, mainly thanks to the characters being able to carry the film along, and as a whole, I really do like it. It was one of my most anticipated of the year, and it didn't disappoint. Notice the fast ticking sound in the background? That's the audience's heartbeat you can hear. Dunkirk is one of the most well-made films of the year, one in which you'll be appreciating how greatly the suspense is set up, all whilst you're on the edge of your seat. This is an intense movie with a capital I, thanks to Hans Zimmer's score, Christopher Nolan's direction, the performances from all the cast, and the presentation. Little CGI was used, and it's all the better for it in immersing you into this real-life event, and you barely ever see the Germans, meaning you never know if they're close by, making things all the more suspenseful. This isn't a traditional film, but rather an experience, and if you missed the chance to see it on the big screen, or were turned nearly deaf by the IMAX like I was, then it's well worth checking out on Blu-ray or DVD. It might be a nail-biting watch, but it's certainly a great one. If you told me this time last year that a Marvel movie would rank this high on my list, I would have said, yeah, right. I have not really enjoyed the few films of theirs that I'd seen, but I got a YouTube ad of Spider-Man vlogging and it made me curious to check it out. And I'm certainly glad I did, as I had a blast with this movie. And for someone who isn't a big fan of Marvel, what really drew me into this one? Much like Wonder Woman, it featured some really likable characters. Tom Holland stole the show so well, I'm surprised he hasn't been arrested for theft. He was insanely charming as Peter Parker / Spider-Man, and he propelled the film along, as well as all the supporting cast who were tons of fun to watch, one of which being a decent villain in the form of Birdman, the Vulture. The film also didn't feature too much action, and was part superhero, part John Hughes movie, but it made the action all the more effective because you're rooting for this well-developed character, as well as being really well done in its own right, with good CG. But you never thought you'd hear me say that. Spider-Man Homecoming was one of the most likeable and entertaining movies of the year, with plenty of heart and thrilling action scenes that made this one a winner, and it's great to have at least one Marvel movie that I really like. But it wasn't quite the best film of the year. To be fair, none of the films I've talked about so far, though I really enjoyed some of them, had no chance of taking the top spot. And although I didn't love it back when I first saw it, my number one has since become one of my favourite movies of all time, and that is... I'm already looking forward to doing the Ranking the Movies of 2017 video because I'm looking forward to see how my opinions have changed from now to January. It didn't take long for my opinion to change either. I was already listening to the soundtrack quite a bit, and a few weeks after seeing it for the first time, I went and saw it again, which I've never done before. Not long after that, I knew nothing was going to top this list, and 5 additional viewings at home pretty much sealed the deal. But what changed? How did this go from a movie that I liked but didn't understand the hype to one of my all-time favourites? I didn't know much about La La Land before entering the theatre, but little clips I'd seen beforehand made me think I was going to see a surreal experience that would have me leaving feeling 10 feet tall. That's not quite what I got, but that's kind of the whole point of the movie. It's about pursuing your dreams and the lengths you'll go to get it in a city known for denying it. How the expectations of what you think you're going to get will be crushed by the harsh reality. But when our two lovers meet, who by the way have fantastic chemistry, you get those perfect moments between the two. The dances, talking about their passions, encouraging one another to keep at the dream no matter what. And the ending, which I won't dare give away, but it's one of my favourite scenes of all time. And the rest of the film does a masterful job of building up to it, whilst being hugely entertaining, with great acting, superb cinematography, wonderful song and dance sequences, or the director with a passion for his craft at the helm. The behind the scenes stuff shows Damien Chazelle's love for film, and it really shines through in the final product. With just 2 movies under his belt, he's already become one of my favourite directors, and I'm hugely excited to see where he goes next. La La Land is the reason I love movies. True, there's nothing wrong with films that are just entertaining, but it's the ones that go beyond just being a fun time that stick with you. This is a film of beauty, emotion, and love from both the characters and the people behind their cameras. It has a soundtrack that reminds me why I love the film, and even though I've seen it 7 times at this point, it never loses its magic. This is by far the best movie I've ever reviewed, and one of my all-time favourites, top 5 easily. Talking about it here and realising how much there is under the surface has given me that extra love for it. And the funny part is, I had no idea that would be the case when I first walked into the theatre and even when I walked out. It took me a while to truly appreciate the brilliance of this film, but I'm certainly glad I did. There's absolutely no competition. La La Land is easily, without a doubt, my favourite movie of 2017.